Man. They try to tell me that aliens built the pyramids. It's funny because they probably did.
Fuck I'm doing talking about pineal glands. Fuck I'm doing talking about pineal glands. Ancient ways of Sumerians. Ain't nothing wrong with a righteous man.
This is my Anunnaki flow. This be my Anunnaki flow. Yo, I got that Anunnaki flow. You are now on planet X. I'm the god, show your respect.
19th century, the heads of the biggest corporations in America, the robber barons, got together and they set rates, they set prices, they determined how they would control information flow, they determined how they get rid of competition. And I'll be darned if we aren't right back there again. Except for this time, you're the robber barons. Your companies are the most powerful companies in the world, and I want to talk about how you're coordinating together to control information. In recent days, my office was contacted by a Facebook whistleblower, a former employee of the company with direct knowledge of the company's content moderation practices, and I want to start by talking about an internal platform called Tasks that Facebook uses to coordinate projects, including censorship. The Tasks platform allows Facebook employees to communicate about projects they're working on together. That includes Facebook's censorship teams, including the so-called community well-being team, the integrity team, and the hate speech engineering team, who all use the Task platform to discuss which individuals or hashtags or websites to ban. Example, here over my shoulder is an example, it's a screenshot of the Task platform in use. You'll notice if the cameras zoom in, several references to election integrity throughout on these lists of tasks. Again, this is shared across Facebook's sites, company locations, by working groups. What particularly intrigued me is that the platform reflects censorship input from Google and Twitter as well. So Facebook, as I understand it, Facebook censorship teams communicate with their counterparts at Twitter and Google and then enter those companies' suggestions for censorship onto the Task platform so that Facebook can then follow up with them and effectively coordinate their censorship efforts. Well, let me see if this refreshes your memory. There's a demonstrative now over my shoulder. Centra is a tool that Facebook uses to track its users, not just on Facebook, but across the entire internet. Centra tracks different profiles that a user visits, their message recipients, their linked accounts, the pages they visit around the web that have Facebook buttons. Centra also uses behavioral data to monitor users' accounts, even if those accounts are registered under a different name. And you can see a shot here, a screenshot provided to us of the Centra platform. We blocked out the user's name in the interest of privacy, although you can see this individual's birth date and age, when they first started using Facebook, their last login, as well as all manner of trackings. How many different devices have they used to access Facebook? How many different accounts are associated with their name? What accounts have they visited? What photos have they tagged? And on and on and on. Mr. Chairman, I'll just say in closing that what we have here is clear evidence of coordination between Twitter, Google, and Facebook. Mr. Zuckerberg knows he has the tools to track this, but he either doesn't remember or won't commit to letting us see it. We have evidence of Facebook tracking its own users all across the web. Mr. Zuckerberg won't answer questions about it, can't remember the name, isn't sure if the tool is deployed in this way, and won't commit to giving us basic information. I submit to you that this is both totally unacceptable and totally predictable, because it is exactly what these tech companies have done to the American people and to Congress for years now, which is why it is time we took action against these modern-day robber barons. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moths now, and big news out of the United States that the antitrust provisions are going to be exercised against Facebook. Let's catch up with Kosha Gada again, who's the Managing Director of Recastled. Thanks for joining us again, Kosha. This is a big story because Facebook is such a massive company. It relates to, of course, the fact that they own Instagram and WhatsApp as well, something I suppose a lot of users might not be aware of, but it gives the company such incredible market power. What are we going to see unfold?
Good to be with you again, Chris. So this news today is the culmination of a year-long investigation that was being undertaken by various government bodies and the United States FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and 48 states and territories. So virtually almost all the attorneys general of those states have filed separate lawsuits, but very complementary ones. And what they're alleging is that Facebook's anti-competitive behavior, the way they're charging it, sort of is on two grounds. One is exactly what you alluded to, which is that they've kind of taken this whack-a-mole acquisition strategy. Whenever there was a competitor rising up that could have mounted a reasonable challenge to them in the competitive markets, their strategy was to acquire them. And so they acquired Instagram for $1 billion in 2012, and then later on WhatsApp in 2014 for $19 billion, which was a staggering sum. And the reason for that was basically to sort of acquire their competition. And then the other thing that they're charging, the other angle, is that they engage in sort of exclusionary anti-competitive behaviors for third-party developers. And this is something that plagues all the big tech companies that are under increasing scrutiny, where their strategy is to get scale of enormous levels, and then they become the portal to other companies who want to access consumers, and everybody basically has to abide by their terms, pay a toll, essentially, on the Facebook highway or the Google highway. So that's sort of what this charge is. They have been anticipating this and been preparing their defense for this, and I think it's going to sort of hash out in the courts.
Just a few minutes ago, I led a bipartisan coalition of 48 attorneys general from around the nation in filing a lawsuit against the social networking giant Facebook. For nearly a decade, Facebook has used its dominance and monopoly power to crush smaller rivals and snuff out competition, all at the expense of everyday users. By using its vast troves of data and money, Facebook has squashed or hindered what the company perceived as potential threats. They've reduced choices for consumers. They stifled innovation, and they degraded privacy protections for millions of Americans. In an effort to maintain its market dominance in social networking, Facebook has employed a buy or bury strategy to impede competing services. First, Facebook used vast amounts of money to acquire smaller rivals and potential rivals before they could threaten the company's dominance. And I'll say billions were thrown at smaller companies in an effort to get them to sell. The two most glaring examples of this unlawful scheme were Instagram and WhatsApp. Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion in 2012, when the company did not even have a cent in revenue. And in 2014, Facebook paid the extravagant amount of $19 billion for WhatsApp, which was far more than industry experts and even Facebook itself valued the company. The second and just as harmful anti-competitive strategy Facebook utilized was suffocating and squashing third-party developers that were invited to utilize Facebook's platform. Facebook would try to squeeze every bit of oxygen out of the room for smaller companies that refused to be bought. Facebook used an open-first, close-later strategy to stop competitive threats, where it would first open its platform to apps created by third-party developers. This increased functionality on the site and subsequently increased the number of users on Facebook. And then Facebook abruptly cut off apps it viewed as a competitive threat. Some of these companies experienced almost overnight drop-off in user engagement and downloads, and their growth stalled. They also sent a clear message to the industry. Don't step on Facebook's turf. Or, as one industry executive put it, you will face the wrath of Mark, referring to Facebook founder, CEO, chairman, and controlling shareholder, Mark Zuckerberg.
Sheryl Sandberg joins us now exclusively from her home in Menlo Park, California, for a wide-ranging on-camera interview, her first since the presidential election and her first since those lawsuits were filed. Sheryl, welcome to Tamron Hall. Let me start by saying we have our virtual audience here today. They are watching, along with obviously millions from home. Almost all of the people in our audience virtually have a Facebook account. 4 of them say that they've had posts taken down. Now, this is unprecedented for you to sit down for this interview for such a long period of time. I think you recognize we have a lot to discuss and a lot to get to. I want to start off with the breaking news. We have talked for several months about you coming on this show. And then this news happened this week where the lawsuits were filed. You heard the words there. There are implications that Facebook operated almost like a mob. One of the lawsuits says that Mark Zuckerberg had the philosophy of it is better to buy than compete. Facebook got WhatsApp and Instagram and the power grab. Is that the philosophy there? Did he say it? It's better to buy than compete.
Well, let me start just quickly by saying thank you, Tamron, for having me on the show. We have talked about this for a long time, and I've been a fan for a long time. I've loved the success of your show, and I love that you have a female team behind you, not just you.
Thank you.
But your executive producer. It really
Thank
matters
you.
to me. So these are serious lawsuits, and I understand that there is real concern about the size and the power of the tech companies, but I think it's really hard to make the argument that we don't compete and compete hard for your time and attention. You know, you have guests on this show. If anyone or anyone out there wants to share, wants to post a video, a photo, send a message. There's our services, but there's iMessage, there's TikTok, there's Snapchat, many of which have grown very big very quickly. I can't get my own kids to post on Instagram because they're so busy on Snapchat and TikTok. You know, if you want to get electricity today for your home, you've got one choice. But you've got lots of choice for your time and attention. I think it's hard to argue there's not competition. I also think it's really worth remembering that when we bought Instagram and WhatsApp, they were really small little companies. Instagram had 13 employees, 13. WhatsApp had 55 employees. And so we bought them a long time ago, we invested, we grew them, and now they're really big. And this is a really big question for American business because those purchases were cleared by our government under antitrust.
Yeah, the FTC cleared those, but did Mark Zuckerberg say it's better to buy than compete?
I don't have in front of me everything Mark ever said, but we face real competition, and those acquisitions were cleared. And if you can buy a company and 8 years, 10 years later, the government can clear it then and unwind it, that's going to be a really big chilling problem for American business. We are not going to be competitive around the world.
Yeah, well, Facebook is a monopoly. They absolutely dominate the social networking site space, which we have all come to depend on. I mean, they were massive and incredibly powerful before the pandemic, but since we live so much of our lives on the internet now, and it's how we connect with our aunts, uncles, our friends, our classmates, all of that. And they've used that massive power, which they have as a monopoly, to maintain it. They've squelched competition, and that hurts consumers. So what we want is to see free competition in the social networking site space so that consumers have meaningful choice.
So break them up?
That could be part of it. What we want is for the court to block them, first of all, from engaging in any anti-competitive behavior going forward, to require Facebook to notify the state AGs before they do more acquisitions, and whatever relief is necessary, and that could include divesting lines of business. We'll have to figure all that out as we go forward with the case.
Are you living or you existing? Gotta start living, can't be resistant. No matter how you get it, just be persistent. Consistent, from not becoming a statistic. Realistic, no lie.